Welcome back to Raw Politics. Now, Facebook, Twitter and Google are not doing enough to protect the European elections from interference. That's according to a Commission report, which calls out the companies for falling short on their disinformation strategy that was launched in December. Well, the Commission identified little progress on the priorities, including scrutiny of advertisement placements, transparency of political advertising, closure of fake accounts, and marking systems for automated bots. All right, some monitoring groups say that these shortcomings could make the EU more vulnerable to online attacks from Russia specifically. Well, joining us now live from Spain to talk more about this is Fabrice Poitier, disinformation expert and senior advisor on the Transatlantic Commission on Election Integrity. Good to see you there, Fabrice. Now, you know, there's a lot of warnings on the dangers of interference in elections. What new evidence have you seen in terms of specifically coming from Russia on these platforms?
I think the new evidence are mostly about the big vulnerabilities that we in Europe have vis-à-vis a power like Russia. And it's three Ps: people, parties, platforms. People, because I think we are all vulnerable to disinformation, to some fake news campaign, as we saw during the Gilets jaunes demonstration in France, for example. Parties, because some political parties are actually producing themselves fake news or are actually vulnerable to hacking. And finally, platforms, because as you said in your introduction, the big social media platforms are basically not doing enough to create trust that indeed they are secured and that they are not going to be a place where people can be fooled.
We've talked about in the past about the vulnerabilities of the European Union, especially with the elections coming up. And you said before that Ukraine was a testing ground for these Russian hackers. What about the upcoming EU elections? Is this going to be a much bigger testing ground for these hackers?
Yes, but as often, well, first, it's not only hackers. It's more diffuse than that. It's dirty money, it's fake news, it's traditional hacking of political party servers or electoral commission. So it's a more multidimensional strategy. It's not a one-shot strategy, first. Second, as you know, there are many member states, all member states involved in those elections. And I think you will have to watch for the weakest links, where the Russians or other foreign powers will have an interest in meddling. And the weakest links are obviously the small member states who are, easier prey, but also the bigger member states where if you manage to really disrupt the electoral process, you can earn real dividends by having more radical or more populist MEPs in the European Parliament.
Okay, and Fabrice, so finally, what is the end game? I mean, if this is going to be, a testing ground for finding the weakest link and how they can succeed at influencing elections, what is the end game? What for? Why is this being done?
Well, it's done, I think, to shame us as Democrats and as, belonging to a system we call the democratic process. And it's just about disrupting, confusing, creating doubt. It's not necessarily about getting some certain people elected, even though I think that's a second objective that a power like Russia appreciate. But moreover, is to really shame democracy. And I think what we have to do is to be resilient as citizens and resilient as political parties. And this is why, for example, the Transatlantic Commission I represent has put forward a pledge for European election integrity, where we ask all the candidates and all the parties to take a 5-point pledge for basically not fooling around and not using the tactic of Russia.
All right, thank you for that, Fabrice Poitier, an expert in disinformation, joining us from Spain there. Thank you. And here with me in the studio to discuss this is tech journalist Jennifer Baker. And still with me is Shana Islam from Friends of Europe and British MEP William Dartmouth. Jennifer, I'll start with you. What Fabrice was saying there, I think what I understand from his last answer is that this is about ideology and it's about, the concept of democracy rather than getting someone in particular elected. I mean, that's not a primary goal. Do you agree with that?
I think so. I mean, I think it's if you can be seen to disrupt elections, then it reduces the public faith in the outcome of those elections, and that makes the entire social fabric more unstable. And I think that is probably the overall aim, rather than a particular policy in the Parliament or anything like that.
And from a technical tech point of view, what is the weakest link, really?
Well, The Commission came out today with a statement saying that the big social media companies aren't doing enough. Well, quite frankly, the European Commission isn't doing enough either. It left it till far too little too late for this code of practice on disinformation. It was put together very, very hastily at the end of last year. They had 4 meetings, this high-level working group, before they came up with the practice. And the practice is, OK, it avoids real regulation, which is, of course, what those big tech companies want, but it also is kind of meaningless. They've got these targets on bots, so they've got to identify fake accounts, disrupt these bots and take them down. But we don't know what those numbers mean. Is a high number of bots being found and taken down a good thing? Or is it a bad thing because, oh, there are more bots? And if the numbers come down, then is that because they're identifying more of them and they're taking them down? Or is it because there are fewer of them out there? So transparency is great to come up with these numbers and so on, even though based on today's report, they're not really doing so much and even doing that. But the transparency and numbers are no good unless you're actually understanding the story and the meaning behind them. And the Commission doesn't seem to be doing that.
All right, and from a more, I guess, most personal point of view, William, as a politician, are you aware when you are being a victim of fake news?
No, well, I'm actually very sceptical about this. First of all political campaigns since time immemorial have featured rather false facts and sizzles. Even the great Tony Blair.
So you think this is no different?
Well, it always has. Now, and the other reason why I'm very sceptical is we've had two big elections. We've had the referendum result in the UK and the election of Donald Trump in the US, both of which were elections which the establishment didn't like. And therefore, instead of saying well, look, we, the establishment, ran lousy campaigns, and that's why these people... And that's why these people won, and they lost. They're saying, oh, it must have been interference, it must have been a thing. Yeah, I'm very, very dubious about that.
But William...
Now, also the point that you made with great clarity was we've got the European elections coming up. The European parliamentary elections are very likely going to have a result which the European establishment are not going to like.
But then,
with a lot of parties who actually disagree with them. So the first thing they're saying now is they're bound to be interfered with so that they can question the result.
I'm going to ask Shada, because, you know, is that irresponsible to say, oh, well, all politicians lie anyway, and all campaigns are based on... I mean...
No, not quite what I said, but...
I know,
but, you know, I am worried about foreigners hacking and, you know, interfering with our democracies. But we ourselves are undermining our democracy. I think, you know, some of our politicians... Brexit was based on misleading fake news.
I can't agree with you. That's what I'm saying.
So Orban, at the moment in Hungary, fake news about Jean-Claude Juncker and George Soros. What was said about the Aachen Treaty by the French tabloids and the German tabloids, that this was a kind of giving away Alsace or whatever. We are destroying democracy and the credibility of our democracy ourselves. So, you know, I'm you know, yes, there will be foreign interference, and then I think we have to be aware of it, prepared for it. Forewarned is forearmed. So let's, you know, get that message across. But let's also work on ourselves and reinforce what we have. Are we so weak that every little thing that destabilizes us?
Jennifer.
Well, I mean, I agree with what Shada is saying there. I mean, part of the success of fake news is also that if real politicians are saying things that are so outlandish and so outrageous that you believe them, that the fake is sometimes not even as outlandish as what actual politicians are saying, then some of the responsibility lies there. And I think we're now in a space where, from a tech point of view, so-called deep fakes, where you can fake the video and the voice of someone, is becoming more and more sophisticated.
We need to upgrade our skills.
We need to upgrade our skills, but we also maybe need to have politicians acting in a more somber, sober way, so that we're not fooled by these crazy videos that look like them, sound like them, and increasingly will be difficult to distinguish from a real person. If we can say, well, he would never have said that, then that's where it comes down to understanding media literacy,
pulling back
training.
The rhetoric.
And, you know, we talk about young people.
Okay, last point, Shada.
No, we say, you know, let's warn the young people. I think it's the older people who are the most easily duped. So let's have to work on the older people, because they're voting for the populists.
William is smiling.
Poor chap, exactly.
All right.
I live in 65.
He's smiling.